Hello and welcome back to Bigfoot Lake. Tonight we have two encounters to share. The first one is a fairly short encounter that was sent to me a couple years ago from my good friend William. So we're going to start off with that short encounter before we move on to another amazing encounter from Montana. So with that being said, pull up a stump, sit back and relax as we dive into this first short encounter sent in by my friend William. Bigfoot. This is my brother's story from back in the early 70s. He was living in Riverview, Florida after he got out of the Marines. He worked at a speed shop that built rear ends for Richard Petty and a few others. He also worked part-time with the police. When they had trouble finding someone, they would call him. One night, an officer hit a quote-unquote monkey man with his car, and this monkey man thing ran off. So my brother was called in. My brother said the front end of the car was pushed about 4 inches to the right of center. After going over the car, they found hair that was very strong like wire. It was reddish-brown in color. My brother went into the wetlands hunting this thing, but he never found it. He heard sounds, but couldn't locate where it was coming from. The sounds kept confusing him. He said, "It's not much, but it is a true encounter." And you can share this story if you want. I left my brother's name out. So that was one that had been sent to us, like I said, from 2021, and it's from our good friend William. And one of the things that I found very interesting about this encounter was when William's brother went into the wetlands and was looking for this thing and could never find it. He could hear the sounds but couldn't locate where it was coming from. The sounds kept confusing him. Now, have you guys ever heard of infrasound? Infrasound is something that is unique to Bigfoot. It's sound frequencies that are either lower or higher than humans can audibly hear. And infrasound can really wreak havoc with humans. It can cause nausea, disorientation, confusion. So possibly this could have been what's going on. And that was in Riverview, Florida, so possibly a skunk ape. So what do you guys think of that first short encounter from our friend William? And you know, these encounters as they're sent in, they don't have to be long encounters or like William did. Just send it as it happened. No need to embellish or, do what Hollywood does and glamour it up. Just tell the story. So I want to thank William for sending that one to us a couple years ago. So I hope you enjoyed that one. With that being said, let's dive into our second encounter. And this encounter involves some pretty serious boulder throwing. So let's dive in here. This is from Lewis and Clark County in Montana. This was in Labor Day weekend of 2004. The Missouri River, northeast Helena. My friends and I were fly fishing the Missouri River up in Montana at a favorite spot. I won't say exactly where, but it's several clicks downriver from the dam. The area has high brush, and I guess those are willows lining the river. Some trees, but it's mostly flats that climb up into the surrounding mountains covered with pines. We've seen bear in that place before, but far off. I am a Texan, and my buds are from Enid and Medill, Oklahoma, but we fly up to Montana to fish almost every year. Great country. Trout fishing is nothing like the bass fishing down here at Toledo Bend, but Montana is more tranquil and far less traveled. The spot is fairly well concealed from being seen once we were in the water and busy fishing. It was dawn coming up, and my friends were about 70 yards downstream from me, and I was busy casting when a rock came flying and popped into the water about a couple feet in front of me. So I yelled at those guys and told them to knock it off. But I don't think they heard me, and they were busy fishing from what I could tell. It was getting lighter, the sun coming up and all, and I was not having much luck and was thinking about changing my flies when dang if another rock didn't come flying out of nowhere, splashing in front of me again. I saw this rock coming in. It wasn't from my buddy's direction either. About that minute the thought struck me, I'd better look around to see who was screwing around with me, and I saw this huge Bigfoot in a squatting position on the bank, not really hidden from view. I froze. I couldn't muster any brain power, and my knees turned to mush. I heard about these things, Bigfoot and all, read about them in the newspapers, but never believed much of that stuff or was much interested in Bigfoot, to be honest. So now I'm thinking, what should I do? The thing sat there on its haunches, just looking at me. Hell, I didn't know what to do. It was only about 150 feet from me, and it wasn't moving. I just stood there in the water, shaking in my waders, and I stared back at this thing. He looked long and hard at me, and I didn't know if I was being sized up for his morning victuals or if he was just watching me fish. Not that I'd caught anything, you know. I turned to see where my buddies were, and they'd gone way the hell downriver. No help at all. There I was, just me and this giant staring at each other. I didn't even have a sidearm with me. What a picture. I mean, you can't dream something like this up. Was he as scared as I was? I figured if he was going to come after me, he would have by now. I glanced at my watch. 5 minutes went by, and then a few more minutes. He still sat there, motionless, and I was getting very antsy. What do? I felt caught between a rock and a hard spot. Now you won't believe what happens next. I decided to get out of the river on the opposite bank from the Bigfoot by moving slowly, figuring to make a run for it to my buds. Safer in numbers was the best my brain could do to get me out of this predicament. It seemed reasonable at the time. As I began to make my move, this Bigfoot thing stands up and takes a giant step into the river. Oh God, he's coming after me, and I'm going to die here in the river, or at least have to change my shorts for sure. But I froze again in place, and the thing stopped too. Then it reached down and pulled up a big rock with one hand out of the river and heaved that sucker underhand at me. Man, here comes this rock at me with perfect aim. I leaned out of the way, raising my arms just in time to see it gather up another rock. My God, he's going to stone me to death. My head went blank. You can't imagine the thoughts I had. I didn't know which way was up. I was scared. At this point, I began to realize it was trying to scare me away for some reason. Because if he wanted to nail me, it sure could have. The rocks kept coming, and I looked around once, turning to walk backwards, and his arms were waving around in the air wildly. The closer I got to the other side of the bank, the more the rocks came. I must be going in the wrong direction to please this thing. So I changed directions and headed downriver in the middle of the river to my buddies, who were surely not going to believe this. I kept going, half the time walking backwards to keep an eye on this humongous thing. I guess that wasn't pleasing to him, because as long as I went downstream, great. No rock throwing. But as soon as I tried for the bank, the rocks came flying. If you didn't know what a great shot these Bigfoot are at rock throwing, you know now, because he was dead on accurate, usually just barely missing me each time. And another thing, he didn't select small pebbles to throw at me. These were huge rocks that made giant splashes in front of me. I'm thinking, okay, I'm leaving, but I didn't know which way to go. Finally, the Bigfoot went across the river, watching me with every step and into the willows along the opposite side of the river. But I could see at times his head and shoulders above the willows. I didn't know if it just wanted to get to the other side and was scared of me, or if he was actually trying to move me out of the area. There maybe was something in those willows he was after. I wasn't going back to check. Maybe there was family in those willows. I read somewhere they sometimes are seen in families. Is that true? Or maybe it had food or a cache of fish in there. I thought of 1,000 things, but it all came back to the initial messages, which was he didn't want me around on that side of the river. I caught up with my friends, huffing and puffing and white as a sheet, and they looked at me like I was suddenly off my rocker. My heart was pounding so hard I thought I was going to have a heart attack. I'm nearly 60 years old, and believe me, I have retired from fishing in Montana. We settled down on the bank, and I told them what happened. Their jaws dropped. We poured some coffee from the thermos, talked a bit, and decided that the three of us best leave altogether and fish somewhere else. In the end, we went back to the motel. To hell with fishing in Montana again. With my sanity back now, I figure this guy was well over 7 feet tall, closer to 8 feet, and nothing I cared to screw with. It was grayish across his back, to cream color and black hair on his chest and lower extremities. It had a man's face, unshaven like, and long tangled hair everywhere. A crop of longest hair down its neck and in the whisker area. One thing I remember mostly, the intensity of the eyes, the strong head and the barrel-like chest. My regrets are many. I wished I had kept my wits about me. Maybe even I should have thrown a rock back at him. I wonder what he would have done if I would have thrown rocks back at him. You ever heard of that? So that is the conclusion of the second encounter. So what do you guys think of that one? My biggest question that I have from this encounter is, was that Bigfoot protecting something in those willows? Was there perhaps a family in those willows that he was driving this man away from? What do you guys think about that? And if, just like this gentleman says, if you didn't know, Bigfoot are deadly accurate at throwing rocks. It sounds like this encounter included many rocks thrown that were strategically landing close to this gentleman. So almost sounds like this giant was trying to drive this man away from something. I didn't want him going across the river to that other bank. So I would appreciate it if you would leave me a comment. What do you guys think this Bigfoot may have been protecting? Or do you think maybe there was a different motive here? I'd always like to hear you guys' thoughts on these things. So leave me a comment and let me know if you enjoyed these encounters. I do appreciate William sending me that encounter, the first encounter from a couple years ago. William's a good friend of mine, so I appreciate that, brother. And yeah, let me know how you like the encounters. I would appreciate it. So I appreciate each and every one of you for hanging out with us tonight for a bit, and I hope you have a great night. And as always, we'll see you on the next.